I invite you to open your Bibles this morning to Genesis chapter 50, the last chapter in our Genesis sermon series. You can find that on page 55 of the Black Edition Pew Bible in front of you. If you don't have a Bible, take that Pew Bible. Consider it our gift to you this morning. Everyone needs a Bible. Kids open their fruit snacks. Turn your attention to Genesis 50. This is the Word of God speaking directly to us this morning. Then Joseph fell on his father's face and wept over him and kissed him. And Joseph commanded his servants, the physicians, to embalm his father. So the physicians embalmed Israel. 40 days were required for it, for that is how many are required for embalming. And the Egyptians wept for him 70 days. And when the days of weeping for him were past, Joseph spoke to the household of Pharaoh, saying, "If now I have found favor in your eyes, please speak in the ears of Pharaoh, saying, my father made me swear, saying, I am about to die. In my tomb that I hewed out for myself in the land of Canaan, there shall you bury me. Now therefore let me please go and bury my father. Then I will return." And Pharaoh answered, "Go up and bury your father, as he made you swear." So Joseph went up to bury his father. With him went up all the servants of Pharaoh, the elders of his household, and all the elders of the land of Egypt, as well as all the household of Joseph, his brothers, and his father's household. Only their children, their flocks, and their herds were left in the land of Goshen. And there went up with him both chariots and horsemen. It was a very great company. When they came to the threshing floor of Atad, which is beyond the Jordan, they lamented there with a very great and grievous lamentation. And he made a mourning for his father 7 days. When the inhabitants of the land, the Canaanites, saw the mourning on the threshing floor of Atad, they said, "This is a grievous mourning by the Egyptians." Therefore the place was named Abel Mizraim. It is beyond the Jordan. Thus his sons did for him as he had commanded them, for his sons carried him to the land of Canaan and buried him in the cave of the field of Machpelah to the east of Mamre, which Abraham bought with the field from Ephron the Hittite to possess as a burying place. After he had buried his father, Joseph returned to Egypt with his brothers and all who had gone up with him to bury his father. When Joseph's brothers saw that their father was dead, they said, "It may be that Joseph will hate us and pay us back for all the evil that we did to him." So they sent a message to Joseph saying, "Your father gave this command before he died. Say to Joseph, please forgive the transgression of your brothers and their sin, because they did evil to you. And now please forgive the transgression of the servants of the God your father." Joseph wept when they spoke to him. His brothers also came and fell down before him and said, "Behold, we are your servants." But Joseph said to them, "Do not fear. For am I in the place of God? As for you, you meant evil against me, but God meant it for good, to bring it about that many people should be kept alive, as they are today. So do not fear. I will provide for you and your little ones." Thus he comforted them and spoke kindly to them. So Joseph remained in Egypt, he and his father's house. Joseph lived 110 years. And Joseph saw Ephraim's children of third generation. The children also of Machir, the son of Manasseh, were counted as Joseph's own. And Joseph said to his brothers, "I am about to die, but God will visit you and bring you up out of this land to the land that he swore to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob." Then Joseph made the sons of Israel swear, saying, "God will surely visit you, and you shall carry up my bones from here." So Joseph died being 110 years old. They embalmed him, and he was put in a coffin in Egypt. May God add blessings to the reading of his word. Are you grateful for God's word? We need to give thanks to the Lord for his word. We are a word-centered people. Let's pray. Holy Spirit, use this word. Produce life where there's death. Forgive transgressions where there's sin. Give hope. Give hope to those who are hopeless, feeling lonely, those who are desperate, those who are weak. Give them strength. Care for them. For those here this morning that do not have faith in you, grant faith. For those this morning that need instruction because they're naive, instruct them, build them up, mature them, grow them. We pray this in your name, Holy Spirit. Amen. So, a question asked in most every age is this question: why do bad things happen to good people? That's an important question. That question was made popular by a book written by Harold Kushner called When Bad Things Happen to Good People. That was the book title. It was written in 1981. And Kushner's a Jewish rabbi. It's an important question. He wrote that book after his son died of a premature aging disease. And Kushner was crushed by that. And I don't agree with Kushner's conclusions. But he brings up a very important topic that the church must deal with, and that's the topic of suffering. Suffering is real. We know it's real. We've experienced it. We see it every day. It is a heavy topic. And it's hard to answer that question when you're in the midst of suffering. Why do bad things happen to good people? It's hard in the midst of suffering. Because suffering becomes everything in that moment. But if we take a step back, we're able to do that. Take a step back and ask that question, why do bad things happen to good people? We begin to think biblically about it. Because we can take a step back and we start thinking about it the way God thinks about it. And we gain perspective, we gain wisdom in that. Thinking about things the way that God does. As we think about what God's perspective is of that question sort of has a false start, doesn't it? A little bit of a false start in God's eyes. Because no one's really good, morally. We know that from lots of scriptures. We read that from Mark's gospel this morning. People are capable of doing good things. People are capable of thinking good things. People can accomplish good, but being capable is not the same thing as being born perfectly moral or perfectly righteous, which we're not. Our children aren't born good. One of the main reasons why people have a false sense of their own goodness, because everyone would say, well, I'm a good person, and everyone's good. One of the reasons why there's a false perspective of that, and it's not that God didn't create us to be good. He did. We'll get to that. But the reason why they have a false perspective of that is because they're failing to consider the holiness of God. God's just not willy-nilly sort of good. God is perfectly devoted to moral perfection. His desire is for that. He desires it. He craves it. He longs for it. That's what his righteousness is all about. And what can happen if we're not careful is when we start perceiving our own goodness in light of God's holiness, then we think we've got all the candy in the world with our trick-or-treat bag. When really God owns the Hershey's Chocolate Company. That's the comparison. The book of Genesis helps us, doesn't it, answer this really fundamental question. But the way it's doing it is by asking the question a little bit. The way that Genesis asks this question is, why do bad things happen to people God originally intended to be good? Because he did. And the answer is sin. That's why bad things happen. Sin. God created all of us to be good, but we chose of our own volition, our own emotion and desire and intellect to rebel against God. And we unleashed havoc upon this good world that God created. What we chose is what Adam and Eve chose. Adam and Eve chose treason. They chose to become thieves. They robbed God of glory as king. Here's an even more profound question. Why did God allow it? Who let the serpent in the garden? Why is it all there? Where's this all coming from? Genesis 50 helps us, doesn't it? Because Genesis 50 lets us peek behind the curtain at the sovereignty of God and the mystery and wonder and glory of God's will. It's amazing. At the very end of the book, we get answers to what happens at the beginning of the book. We see here in Genesis 50, Jacob, he's being buried. It's in a place of honor among the patriarchs of Israel. And we see Joseph being buried too. And we see a resurrection happening in a sense, don't we, with Joseph. And in the midst of this suffering and this tragedy of Jacob dying and in Joseph's conversation with his brothers, we see a commentary on what God is doing with the evil in the world. Because even though we mean things for evil, God means it for good, to bring salvation. But it's through the suffering, it's through the tragedy, through the trial, that God is going to do it. And so in this conversation that Joseph has with his brothers, we see two parts to it. We see Joseph's brothers bringing this up, this idea of forgiveness and this idea of retribution for the evil that they've done. But then we see Joseph, who stands as the Messiah. He stands as this Christ figure who's already saved them and saved the people of the world who came to them during the famine in Egypt. You see him standing there offering forgiveness, responding not with judgment, but with grace. There's a picture of the gospel here that's so beautiful. It's wonderful for us to behold. And we should behold it as something that's wonderful, but also something that's applied to us as we think about forgiveness in the way that God does in the midst of suffering and evil. So what I want to do is I want to, this morning, apply this conversation that they're having to us. I want to look at the two parts and let the gospel be preached to us. I mean, that's what God's doing. God is preaching the glorious redemption of the gospel to us so that when we go through suffering, we'll know how to respond. So that when we understand the power of sin, it's not that it's everything, but it's in light of God's power to redeem. In spite of sin, even we would say, in the midst of sin, God gets to the heart of darkness and redeems it from the inside out. That's what we see happening. So that the gospel becomes this filter for us to understand God's faithfulness and His grace from Genesis 50. That's really the story of humanity. If you think about the story of humanity is right here in the book of Genesis. People mean evil, but in it, God means good. God means good. So let's look at the two parts. Let's look at the brothers' conversation with Joseph, verse 15. He says this: when Joseph's brothers saw that their father was dead, they said, "It may be that Joseph will hate us and pay us back for all the evil we did to him." Which they deserve, don't they? I mean, this is something that's real. They're taking real responsibility for something evil that they know that they did to Joseph. Verse 16. So they sent a message to Joseph saying, "Your father gave this command before he died. Say to Joseph, please forgive the transgression of your brothers and their sin, because they did evil to you. And now, please forgive the transgression of the servants of the God of your father." So Adam and Eve, they could point to something specific too that they did that was evil, couldn't they? If you're really going to take responsibility for sin, to understand what the gospel is doing in your life, on some level it requires a conviction. There must be a commitment to your responsibility for the evil that you've done. A real good example of this is children. They do evil all the time. But the first thing they do when they commit evil is they blame their brother and sister. They blame their aunt. They blame their grandma. They blame their dog. They blame their teacher. They're real quick. That's the nature of who we are. We're real quick to begin casting blame. The blame game's a big game in America. People play the victim card constantly, and I don't want to get into it politically, but it's real. This is real. And it begins hurting not only other people, but it hurts the conscience of us. It actually hurts the psychosis of people when they're not to blame for anything. When in reality, we're to blame for the evil. I mean, the first thing we see right here in understanding what these brothers are doing is they are committed to taking responsibility for the evil that they have committed. They feel guilty. They're not playing the victim card. They are guilty for what they've done. If you never take responsibility for your sin, you're never going to see your need for forgiveness. You've got to take responsibility for your sin. I think one of the best things that we can do for our children and for others is to help cultivate God's authority in their lives. That's not easy to do. We would say maybe it would take a lifetime, which it does. But it's in the natural rhythm of our relationship with our children and with each other. We help cultivate God's authority so we can take responsibility for what God has entrusted to us. One of the ways we can do that is by teaching our children to take responsibility for their sin. But the other way we can do that is by teaching them to receive direct speech. I think that's real important. I don't mean mean speech. I don't mean unloving speech. But I mean cultivating an opportunity in the lives of our kids and one another to receive direct speech. It's important because it provides clarity to what sin is and when we mess up and our faults, so that there can be real conviction. When we talk about sin from the pulpit, we don't mean to be mean. We're not trying to condemn people. We're not in charge of condemning people or judging people or granting salvation or anything. That's God's job. But we need to be clear. We need to be clear. Direct speech. People shy away from direct speech a lot. We need to help them by understanding that God speaks directly to us about our sins so we can recognize what evil really is and how we're prone to it. And so we can't play the blame game. We deserve to be punished. That's the beauty of the gospel, isn't it? Jesus took the punishment for us. That's what makes the gospel good news, is Christ took responsibility. He didn't sort of, they kind of sinned, and I'll think it's a good thing to sort of show them what sacrifice is. No! He takes responsibility for real evil that we've committed and dies in our place so we can really be saved. We can really be forgiven. And so we need to take responsibility for our sin, which the brothers do. And we see this also in their plea for forgiveness, because it's a genuine plea. Verse 16. So they sent this message. Your father gave this command before he died. Say to Joseph, please forgive the transgression of your brothers and their sin, because they did evil to you. Now, did Jacob really say this? It's debated. I think the point is recognizing that Joseph has authority, doesn't he? That's what they're doing. Now, whether Jacob said this or not, I actually tend to believe he didn't say this. But because they recognize Joseph had so much authority over their lives now that Jacob was dead, they desperately want forgiveness. They don't want to be banished. They don't want to be condemned. They want genuine forgiveness. And so they recognize that authority. Whenever I was on staff at the Campus Crusade, once a week we would go to the public library when I lived in Greeley, Colorado, and we would go there and we'd study the Bible and we'd prepare sermons and we'd prepare our evangelism that we were going to do on campus and all that sort of thing. And I used to ride my bike to the library. And one of these beautiful mornings, I was riding my bike to the library and I got there and there was no bike rack for my bike. And I really liked my bike. And I didn't want it to get stolen. It was a nice bike. And so instead of going home and driving, I decided I'm just going to carry this into the library. And so I did. So I walked into the library, and the first employee of the library said, you can't bring that bike in here. And I said, pretty please. She said, no, you're going to take it outside and put it on the bike rack. I said, there's no bike rack out there. Can I please do it? And she said, no. And I said, okay. And so I walked it to the foyer, the entryway, and I put it just inside a little bit. And when I turned around, the director of the whole library was standing there. And I just immediately turned around and grabbed it and walked out. And I think I did go home, so I was scared to death. You feel that when the big dog shows up, right? When you're sent to the principal's office, you know something's really wrong, right? When your parents are called, you know something's really wrong. Whenever God sends Jesus, you know something's really wrong. Whenever he dies the death the world deserves to die, you know this is serious. We got to recognize God's authority People today have a hard time recognizing God's authority in light of their sin. No wonder they're deceived about their relationship with God. People today who do not believe they need to be forgiven, I bet the dogs, the donuts, do not recognize God's authority. They don't. They don't care about God's authority. God is authoritative, not only to forgive everyone of all their sins, but he has the authority to condemn. God reserves that. He's the judge. He has authority to pronounce eternal life on all who would come to him in faith. This is why we talk about the gospel so much. Because we don't have that authority. God holds that authority. God has the authority to make the lame walk and the blind see. None of us can do that. God can do that. God has the authority to take the strongest addiction that you think is in control of your life and destroy that addiction. That's the power of God. He can do what we think is impossible because he has authority, real authority. That's the authority of God. God has the authority to organize a church however he wants to organize it. It's our job to submit to that authority. God has the authority to tell us what kind of parents we should be, to tell us what kind of men we should be, or women we should be, or what kind of relationships we should have. God has that authority. There's an incredible boldness when you're really submitting to God's authority. The last thing God said to his disciples before he ascended is he said, all authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. Go and make disciples. So we go with the authority of God resting on our shoulders. We should be courageous in that. I mean, we should really capitalize on the authority of God in our disciple making. I know it's intimidating. You come to Go Teams and you're intimidated because what are you going to say? Who are you going to talk to? And what are you going to do? Trust God. He'll help you. I go out asking the very same questions. I don't know. Before I know, me and Alan are in deep in an hour-long conversation with someone I don't really know on the side of the road here in Palmyra, talking specifically about God's forgiveness in the gospel. We have to do that, trusting in God's authority. And you can accomplish amazing things in your life when you're fearful of that authority rather than fearful of the authority of man or man's opinion. What can man do to us? Nothing. All because of God and his authority over our lives. Jesus once was teaching the Bible, and he was in a house, and the Pharisees and the scribes were at his feet. And they're the ones who were supposed to know the Bible. So they're at his feet, he's teaching the Bible, and people bring to him a paralyzed man. But they can't get to him because the crowd is all around him. And so they come through the roof, tear the roof out, and then they lower him down. And Jesus says to this man, the first thing he says to this paralyzed man is, your sins are forgiven. That's what he says. And he knew that the Pharisees and scribes were questioning this in their hearts because they say, what is this blasphemy? Only God can forgive sins. And Jesus asks them, which is easier? To say your sins are forgiven or rise up and walk? And he looks at them and he says, rise up and walk too. Both. That's the authority of Christ. He has the authority to forgive and heal spiritually. He can heal your marriage. He can heal your attitude. He can heal your laziness. He can heal your apathy. He can heal that. He can heal your hateful heart. He can heal that. That's the authority he has. And he can heal you physically. He can heal your proximity. He can heal your habits. He can heal those. That's the authority of Christ. Submit to his authority and watch him start healing stuff. Right after that passage, he goes to it. Right after it, he says he walks out and went to a tax collector named Levi. And he says, follow me. And the text says, Levi left everything and followed him. That is the authority of Christ. That's who we follow. It's an amazing authority. Jesus forgives sins. We should humbly submit to the authority that Jesus had. That's the Christian life, isn't it? It's really learning and growing and developing and helping each other humbly submit ourselves to receiving that forgiveness. Every day that we buck against that authority and don't receive that forgiveness, we mock what Jesus accomplished on the cross. That's what we do. But every day that we do, we glorify Christ. We celebrate what Jesus accomplished on the cross. And he's still accomplishing with the gospel in and through us. So come with your failures. You know, Jesus doesn't save us
in spite of our failures. Jesus saves us in our failures. He gets down in our failures and saves us. So come to him with your failures. Come to him with your spite. Come to him, and Jesus will forgive you. That is the authority of God. Pursue that forgiveness. If you're here this morning and you're really wanting to be free from the chains of sin, because they feel burdensome, don't they? They're heavy. Those chains are heavy chains. Jesus frees you. John 8:36. When who the Son sets free is free indeed. That's Jesus in your life. Be free. Be free. You can live free today. All because of Jesus' authority. That's how his brothers are coming. They're coming convicted. They need forgiveness. That's how we come to Christ. So how does Joseph respond to them? It's so luxurious. It's so extravagant how he responds to them. At the end of verse 17, Joseph wept when they spoke to him. Joseph weeps. Why does he weep? I mean, he weeps for many reasons. Probably because he knows Jacob didn't say that. But they desperately want forgiveness. His brothers also came and fell down before him and said, "Behold, we are your servants." But Joseph said to them, "Do not fear, for am I in the place of God?" No, he's not. But it's interesting what the author wants us to see, isn't it? Because he wants us to be thinking about that. There's some symbolism going on here, because Joseph is a royal figure, and he does have authority. He is sort of standing. He's not God, right? He doesn't have the authority to forgive sins. He's recognizing that. But there's an imagery here of one who's in a position of authority about to declare to them verse 20. Verse 20. If you haven't got this highlighted in your Bible, this is the verse to highlight in your Bible. As for you, you meant evil against me, but God meant it for good, to bring it about that many people should be kept alive as they are today. So do not fear. Do not fear. You meant evil against me, but God meant it for good. What atheists do is they look around the world and they say, there's no meaning to this world. It's just all meaningless. It's all random. It's just chance. You live, you die, you try to survive. It's survival of the fittest. That is it. If there's any meaning, it comes from aliens. That's what they say. Christians, we look at the world and we say, what we meant for evil, God meant for good, to bring it about that many should live. That's what we say. We say what God says. That's why we pray. That's why we share the gospel with people who are hard-hearted or don't understand it or have never heard about it. That's why we do it. This is why we love one another sacrificially, with humility. Because what we mean for evil, God means for good. So we take something that's horrific and we turn it into an opportunity. It's an opportunity of love, grace. It's an opportunity of showing Christ-like sacrifice and generosity. That's what we do. We take advantage of those opportunities, don't we? Because we believe that what we mean for evil, God means for good. Why do we keep growing in our faith together? You ever wonder that? A lot of people walk away from the church. Why do we keep growing and maturing together in our character? Why do we want to continue working on our attitudes and continue shaving down and polishing our talents and our time management, our stewardship of our money? Or why do we think real critically about how to do that well? It's because what we mean for evil, God means for good. And the greatest good that it can come from it is shown to us in Jesus. That's the greatest good. This is why Jesus calls us to bear his image and to reflect his glory, to become like him. Because the more we seek to pursue that redemption, the more the church makes the gospel visible. And that's what we want. We want people to see more of the gospel and less of us. The glory of the gospel is we can bring our evil to God, and he nails it to a cross and buries it, and it's dead. That's the beauty of the gospel. So when we come, our old self has died with Christ on the cross. And when Jesus rises from the dead, our new self rises with him to live victorious over that evil. Don't think evil's got a chain on you. It doesn't. It's trying to make you think it does, but it doesn't. So if you're really tempted, you can really repent. If you feel like there's really a burden, it can really be lifted. That's real. And it all comes because God takes our and crucifies it. That's the gospel. That's our gospel message. Jezebel doesn't even stand a chance against that. That is the glorious redemption that we have in Christ. There is no evil that can stand against Christ because he murders it. He crushes it. Satan is under his feet and Satan is crushed. That's Christ. And he's for you. He's not against you. He wants you to come to him. If people don't come with you to the foot of the cross of Christ, then you take the cross to them. Because when you take it to them and really show them the good that Christ offers them in the gospel, they will bow down too. And they will seek that forgiveness. Where's your one? Who's your one? I talked about this at the beginning during the introduction. Find that one who needs the goodness of the gospel and give it to him. It's as simple as that. Give it to him. You're going to give it to him differently than I do. Whenever I give people the gospel, I fumble and stumble. That's what I do. I'm fumbling and stumbling and bumbling and don't know what to say, and time's running out, and I feel really awkward, and what am I going to do? And I just give it to him. And then I drive away praying, Lord, have mercy on both of us. Because I hope something good comes from it. I meant it for good. I didn't mean it for evil. So I don't know how you give it, but let's give it. Who's your one? One! Pick one. Who's your one? Maybe all the far as you get is invite them to the Christmas Eve candlelight service. Maybe that's it. Good. Good. Amen. Yeah. You can say that to them. What we mean for evil, God means for good. We're both here. Praise Jesus. We're here. Right? Or maybe you get in deep with the gospel. Maybe they repent and believe, and you say, I got to go Pastor Paul this week. We got baptized this week. Maybe it's that. I got to present them first. I didn't hear you, but amen. Who's your one? They're not going to come to the foot of the cross. Take the cross to them. Take it to them. Be bold. Be bold. You know what Romans 12:21 says? It says this: do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good. Overcome evil with good. Sometimes evil rears its ugly head in the church. It does. We're all imperfect. Overcome that evil with good. Overcome it with good. Overcome it. You're an overcomer because of Christ. Overcome it with good. Wherever you see evil. You know, sometimes students, listen to me, sometimes students, I think sometimes you get distracted by your screens. I'll be honest with you. Adults do too. We do too. We get so distracted by our screens that we're not paying attention to how we can overcome evil with good around us. So when you're in the classroom and you see evil, or when you're in the workplace and you see that evil, maybe you're at county market and you see that evil, or you're in the next ministry team meeting and you see that evil, take advantage of it. Overcome evil with good. Overcome evil with good. Do something good. Say something good. Provide something good. That looks different, doesn't it? There's all kinds of layers to that. And God will use you to spread His glory. That's what we need. We need less people glory. We need more God glory. Our glory is not good. It's terrible. Narcissistic. That's our glory. God's is life-giving. That's what people need, man. I mean, they need that. They need life poured into them. They need life poured into them. They're dead in their sins. You know, we were too, right? That's why we should pour life into each other. Man, that's our mission. You know, that's like the sign overhead. It's a life pourer. That's what we want to be known as, right? I'm a life pourer, man. We want to be life pourers in each other's lives. Pay attention. Pay attention. Dads, what about our homes? I've been thinking about this a lot because there's such an assault on manhood nowadays. These Gillette commercials. They sell razors, for heaven's sake. Right? You're selling a razor. Don't get political. Just sell a razor, man. The assault on manhood. My goodness, pay attention to your homes. Pay attention to your homes. We need to do this now. We need to pay attention to your homes. I want to check on the score, too, at the football game. You know? I want to know if UK lost again. How do they always lose? I get it. They didn't beat Mizzou, so that's good. I want to know if it's snowing. Snow means blessing. Never forget that. But we can get so distracted that we're not seeing the evil even in our own dinner tables. We need to pay attention to the evil around us and overcome it with good. We need to overcome it. There's so much good that men can do in the lives of their little boys and little girls if they would just simply be intentional. It's just simple intentionality to speak truth, direct speech, and that can be affirmation. Like, good job! Proud of you! You can do it! Or I'm here to hear you. I'm here to listen. What did you want to say? You want another toy? Let's not talk about that. Let's talk about being content. You know? Pray with them. Pray with them. You have those encounters with your kids? Pray with them. Pray with them. Sometimes, not every wife's like this, not every dad's like this, and I get it. But there are wives looking to the dads to do this, to do it. To just do it. Take that intentionality. Be that man. Assault evil. Assault evil. You like that? That's a manly word. Assault. Assault evil with good. With the good of the gospel. What a weapon he's given us in the gospel to assault evil. If you get a car for a gift, which I doubt you ever have. I mean, they sell these cars on these Christmas commercials like we're going to give them away as gifts. I mean, who buys a car and gives it away as a gift, right? I mean, no one's going to do that, especially Mercedes. If you received a car as a gift and you spent the whole time paying attention to the keys, you've lost perspective of the gift. The most good we can do with the gospel is not just keeping it to ourselves and sitting and soaking and souring, but sit and soak and spread. I say that a lot. Because when you use it, you watch God do amazing things with the good he's given us in the gospel. That's the greatest good. The greatest good he's given to us is Christ. And all he is, continues to be, and will forever be for us in the gospel. Let that manifest in you. And let every opportunity be one to spread it, even if it's tragic. Think about what God has done through the tragedy here. This is a tragedy, what's happened. It's through the tragedy of Genesis that God uses Joseph to overcome evil with good. It's through the sufferings of Christ, like Pastor Josh was talking about, that God overcomes all our evil, not just a little bit, but all of it, with the most good. So no matter where you're at on the spiritual journey, no matter where you're at, we're all in different places. No matter what barriers you face on Monday morning when the alarm clock goes off, no matter what meeting you've got coming up, no matter what stresses you or tempts you, you can walk into the tragedy knowing Christ has overcome all evil with good. And he's using that in your life, no matter what, for our good. For our good. If you've got God's favor on your side, the world cannot stand against you. It will not stand against you. Even if you think otherwise, it's not standing against you. Jesus has overcome the world. He's overcome it. So we can too, through him. And what's the outcome of that? So let's say we do. We have that mentality. We're ready. We're primed. We've got our weapons of gospel faith that we are going to assault evil with. What is the outcome of that? Verse 20. As for you, you meant evil against me, but God meant it for good, to bring it about that many people should be kept alive as they are today. So do not fear. I will provide for you and your little ones. Thus he comforted them and spoke kindly to them. Do not fear. That's the first thing. Comfort and kindness are the second thing. After Adam and Eve ate the fruit, you know what they did? They hid because they're scared to death. Because God actually told them, the day you eat this fruit, you're going to die. That's what he said. So they're expecting to die. And God shows up on the scene, and you know what he does? He kills an animal. That's what he does. And he covers them with garments of skin. So whenever they leave the garden, because they got to leave, they can't stay here. They are in the wilderness, and they are on a spiritual journey now. When they leave, they will be protected. They will be cared for. There's a redemption there for Adam and Eve. We don't have time to rehearse it again, but if you remember that sermon, Adam recognizes this when he names his wife Eve. He says, you are the mother of all living. Why would he say that? Because God promised that through her would be the seed of the man who would crush the seed of the serpent. And there's real faith there. Adam believes him. He knows God's good on his word. And so he redeems them with a comfort and a kindness that motivates them. Even though there's a flaming sword and an archangel blocking the way to the tree of life again, they've got to trust God for His grace, His kindness, His comfort to continue providing for them. There's a kindness to God's salvation, isn't there? When you receive favor, you receive kindness. You're not going to receive death. You're going to live. And you can help other people live too, so they don't have to die when they stand before God. They can live. They can live. The epitome, here it is, the epitome of God's kindness is overcoming the evil in our hearts with a comfort and a love and a compassion. When we least deserved it, we got it. That's the kindness and comfort of God. We don't deserve for God to remove His wrath against us. We don't. And He does. We don't deserve for God to continue providing love to support our every step in life. We don't deserve it. And God does. We don't deserve to have God's sympathy for us be like a warm blanket that He threads with grace on the loom of compassion, wrapping our lives up. But He does. And we all love warm blankets. It's with us every step of the way. We don't deserve it. Let's be that kind of source of kindness and compassion for one another. If you read through all the one another's in the New Testament, the New Testament believers, that's what they're showing each other. Over and over again, they're showing each other the same care and comfort and compassion. Doesn't mean we don't talk about sin. It's that we talk about sin and we talk about problems and we talk, about issues in that context. That is the context of the local church, so that all the believers are breathing. This is the air we're breathing. It's the comfort and kindness and compassion of God. It's the air we breathe. It's the culture of the church. And that rubs off on people. People sense that when they step into the church. They see it if that church is a church of kindness and comfort and compassion. It's interesting. If you read 1 Corinthians chapter 13, it talks about real, genuine love. And I heard a brother in the Lord, a dear brother in the Lord, say to me one time. He said this. He said, love. He said, how did he put it? He said, love. He said this. Love's not always nice. He said, love's not always nice. And he lived by that. And it bugged me for a long time. Because I knew what he was saying. What he was saying is you got to be able to speak directly to people. You got to talk about truth. People got to be able to handle it. Love's not always nice. That's what he kept saying. When you read 1 Corinthians 13, you know what it says? Love is never mean. It's never mean. In fact, it says love is patient. That's what it says. Love is kind. It says that. It also says love never fails. So it's in that context, isn't it? That we function, operate, and relate. That's the air we should be breathing when we're thinking about the kindness and the comfort of God. And we shouldn't be fearful. The last people on earth we should be fearing are one another in the local church. The church shouldn't be a scary place. Scary places are those crazy, gross Halloween displays that the kids don't want to walk up to because they've got all these horror movie references on them. Those are scary places. The local church isn't that. The local church should be a magnet that attracts people who are scared into their midst, where it's a place where they can be vulnerable. It's a place where they can find help. They can be healed. We're not a mausoleum of righteous saints. We're a hospital for sinners in need of saving. That's what we are. We need people to come in who need to be healed, and they're going to come with their mess and their problems. And we can be a place with our comfort and kindness to speak truth into those situations. That's real truth that comes directly from God. But we need to be living it. We need to be breathing it. So as you think about that this week, as you think about overcoming evil with the good of Christ, wherever you find it, be blessed. I hope you walk away this morning blessed. I was so blessed just drinking in. This passage was like water to my soul. Like drinking in the blessings of God, to be a kindness spreader a comfort spreader, a mitigating fear spreader. People need that. I need that. You need that. We can be that for one another. You may or may not think of yourself as a wealthy person. You may or may not think of yourself as a wealthy person. All of us are rich in Christ. We're wealthy beyond our wildest dreams. So that the more we spread, the more we realize we have. Let's be spreaders. Let's be spreaders. Let me pray for us. Let's pray. Lord Jesus, we love you because you first loved us. We lay our lives down because you laid your life down for us. I'm so grateful to you. Before the throne of God above, you are our intercessor. You are our sacrifice. You are our plea for mercy. And you are the one who satisfies the longings of our heart to know you, the one true and living God, and to experience all of your